Good evening, everyone. My name is Mike Perkins. I am a member of the board of the Huntington County Historical Society. I'm on behalf of the board and the society members. I'd like to welcome you here this evening for our program. And this is a very timely program because we are 11 days away from the 107th running of the Indianapolis 500. I'm sure you've heard of that race. It's in all the media this time of year. And we have with us someone who is as closely associated with that great sporting event as anyone ever who has lived in Huntington County, other than perhaps Gene Hartley from Roanoke, who actually drove in the race numerous times. But Chuck has done it a different way. We're here tonight to talk about that and some of his thoughts and impressions and memories that he carries with him from his involvement in the Indianapolis 500 in the very late 90s, 1996 yes, sir. Through 2000. And so if you give Mr. Homeyer a welcome here this evening. I'll just start things off, and we'll just converse. We'll start things off by asking you, you're a kid from Andrews. You grew up in Andrews, went to Huntington North High School, went to IU, started a business. How does a kid from Andrews wind up sponsoring a race car at the Indianapolis 500? Can you recap that?
Well, obviously we did truckload tool sales around the United States. We went to all 48 of the continental United States, about 3,000 cities. And because we were what they call an itinerant merchant, sometimes that lacks credibility because they just assumed we were going to be fly-by-night and never take care of it. Well, we did it for 20 years, but part of that process was to give legitimacy to our business. And so we felt like that if we sponsored a car at the Indianapolis 500, that would certainly legitimize the business. And so we went down and so that's how we got started with it, is because we were a national company doing, well over $100 million in sales, and so it made an opportunity for us to gain that credibility at a time when we could afford to do it at the Indianapolis 500, and it just kind of all came together in a very interesting way.
You talk about you did this at a time when you can afford to do it. Racing is an expensive proposition. And what did it take then to put one car and a crew and a driver, to put one car in line to qualify for the Indianapolis 500?
Well, back then, they did the whole month of May back then, and so the very skinny on it, there were teams that spent more than this, but you would spend no less than $500,000 to put a car on the track with a decent amount of testing and a run to qualify for the Indianapolis 500 for the month of May. So about $500,000. That was just for the Indy 500. If you wanted to run a whole season, it was about $2.5 to $3.5 million for a whole season back then. Today, I just talked to Johnny Unser the other day, and he told me that the same season and would be about $20 million today. So we were definitely involved at the right time. It's when there was a split between the old CART, which was the team owners series, and the Indianapolis 500. And so because those big team owners didn't come, it lowered the cost of doing business there.
That was your sponsorship was during what they call the IRL years. That was the Indy Racing League years. That was when championship auto racing teams, which had been running the cars at Indianapolis, split from the Speedway back series, which was the IRL. And people tend to think, well, okay, it was a little bit not quite as costly, so it was inferior racing. I want to kind of remind everybody that the Speedway qualifying record that was set in the IRL years still stands. They are running as fast as they've ever run down there now, but they never run any faster than they were in the years that you were sponsoring cars. Now, why did you decide to end your sponsorship?
Yeah, well, only a fool would sponsor an Indy car if you didn't have a good reason to do it, because it's very expensive. Even back then, it was very expensive for us to be involved. And so we obviously, we stopped doing it when there was no longer a reason to do it. It didn't meet our marketing needs. As one of the team owners told me early on, an Indy car doesn't make a very good billboard at 200 miles per hour. And so you have to have another reason. Of course, the first 3 years we did it, the reason was for our credibility. We got with Johnny Unser and Al Unser Sr., and we were allowed to put a picture of our Indy car and them standing behind it on all of our circulars at the time. That's back when print media meant something. And so we put about 70 million of those out a year. And then the last 2 years, we were promoting our Speedway Series professional tools, which we sold in our truckload sales as well. It was a much higher level tool, more for professional. And so we did that for 2 years, and after we'd accomplished our goals there, it just made no sense to continue to do it because, again, not a very good billboard at 200 mile an hour.
Understandable. I think I still have a Speedway Series set of Speedway Series jumper cables somewhere in my garage. So yeah, I do remember that time, and it was a very good use of your relationship with Johnny Unser. And I want to start talking about Johnny. Now, when you were a sponsor, you actually dealt with 3 different IndyCar teams during that period. But you always were a sponsor that was essentially representing the interests of one driver, and that was Johnny Unser. Can you tell us how you became acquainted with Johnny and what drew you to support his career, and what was the nature of your relationship then and now?
Well, what happened was my VP of Finance and good friend Dave Schweitzer, Bill Schweitzer, his son, was my finance guy, and we decided we were just going to go down on the very first day the track opened and see about sponsoring, because we didn't know much about it. And so it happened to be raining really bad that day, and so we went to every team owner that day to ask about opportunities. And 2 of them we looked at, and after we got done talking to everybody, one was with Ron Himmelgard and Buddy Lazier, the other was Johnny Unser with Andreas Laberle. And so we had to make a decision between the 2, and so I tried to get Johnny I asked Johnny if Al Sr. happened to be there, and I'd never met Al Sr. at the time, and so I said, well, would he be willing to be part of the deal? And so we went over and talked to Al, and scared the crap out of me because, you know, he's a 4-time winner. But we became great friends afterwards. But so he agreed to do that, so we went with Johnny, and ironically, that very first year, Johnny finished 33rd with a problem with the gearbox, which we tried to tell the team before the race, but different story. And Ron Himmelgarn, who was the other one we were looking at, he finished first with Buddy Lazier. But it was a great opportunity for us because it gave us what we needed. And so I really became somewhat Johnny's agent, promoter, whatever. And so that's how I got to know all the different car owners. I would go to the tracks and I would just talk to them and tell them how much money we had and what we wanted to do. And I had a driver. I talked to Tom Kelly, and I talked to AJ Floyd. I talked to all of them, you know, any cheaper, everyone. And so we were able to get with Ron Himmelgarn a couple of times. But I developed a really close relationship with Johnny as a result of that, because we spent a lot of time together. And same with Al. You know, Al was kind of our coach for the motorhome. And so we'd meet him at races, and we'd have a little bit of vodka and a little bit of talk, and we'd get things straightened around. And so I became really good friends with Al Sr., probably one of my better friends in the whole world. And he just passed away a couple years ago, which I'm not going to tear up. But Johnny's still kicking, and his daughter Lonnie is running in Pikes Peak, Hilton here, coming up in June, and we're really excited about that, and so that's it. Yeah.
Okay. It's interesting that of all the unsers, the many unsers who have run in Indianapolis who as drivers, the first one was a Jerry Unser who qualified for a race in 1958. It goes back that far, the Unser family involvement. And you have Bobby Unser, Al Unser Sr., Al Unser Jr., all multiple 500 winners, along with Robbie and Unser and Johnny Unser. And the only Unser today who's competing in organized motor racing, as nearly as I can tell, is Johnny Unser's daughter, Lonnie. You just mentioned her. She runs in the Pikes Peak Hill Climb and is going to be also doing another program, I understand, with Honda. So keep an eye. The Unser name is still on the track, so you might keep that.
And we're thinking, we're not sure of the series, but she's going to be in we've got some major funding. I'm also I've become kind of her agent, I guess, too. We also come up with some major funding for Lonnie, so I think that we see a lot more of her in some higher level series over the years.
Excellent. Now, for at least 1 year, you and your wife, Pam, who's in the front row here, nice to see you here, thank you, were actually members of Johnny Unser's pit crew during the 500. Fire suits, the whole 9 yards. They were members of the pit crew. How did that come about? What did you do, and what kind of an experience was that?
Well, I'd like to make it sound like really cool and everything, but the real truth was the years we were in the pits were because there was a shortage of crew members, and so my job was to hold the sign out when he stopped. Not a very important job, but somebody had to do that to tell him where to stop. And Pam was on the pit stand. I'm not sure what her job was that day. Maybe just moral support for me, because I was kind of scared the crap out of me. But and then Dave Schweitzer, my VP of Finance, he was the guy who squirted the water when after they filled the tank up. They squirted with water to dilute the fuel, and so he did that some years. But it was a neat experience. I can't put it in words. I was on TV. I had like 2 seconds of fame during the national anthem one year. We were standing out on the track, the national anthem, and I was on ABC for about 2 seconds. And one of the interesting things about that you would never, I got to tell a story about Pam. Pam and Johnny's wife, Shauna, were up on the pit stand. That was where they were at. And Johnny walks over before he gets in the car, and he says to Shauna and Pam, on this pit stand, because it sets up about 4 feet in the air. He said, now, if there's an accident and something starts coming towards you, you won't have time to get down, so you just fall backwards behind the seat. Remember that? Yeah. And but the other really cool thing was that you wouldn't expect is when they come down the straightaway to start the Indy 500, there's 33 cars with hundreds and thousands of horsepower behind them, coming down a track that has just been cleaned up before the race as much as they possibly can. You feel like you're in a sandstorm. It truly is like a sandstorm coming at you, even though the track has been cleaned to very high specifications, because there's just so much power and turbulence going down through there.
I don't think anybody who hasn't been where you were can I've heard that before, and I heard it from you, and it sounds very dramatic. But again, it's everybody is concentrated on just the fury of the cars and the noise, and you're trying to see things. You're trying to see what's going on because there's just so much dirt going, sand, and everything going on.
It's amazing. I had no idea. Nobody even told me. It's like,
what do we expect?
Yeah.
That may be the highlight of your time at Indianapolis, but if it isn't, or give us another highlight from 5 years during the month of May at the Speedway, other than maybe the start of the races, being where you were. What do you think?
I think, we were always in a team that was underfunded. You know, we didn't have the most money to spend. And I remember I don't remember which year it was even, Pam probably remembers, she's got a memory and I don't, but we had been not up to speed for like the whole time. And this is the last day, like 4:30 in the afternoon, it closes at 6, and we didn't have enough speed to get in the race. We didn't, based on the practice. So Alex, our senior, comes over to Johnny's car and gets down and talks to him, and we went out and we qualified for the race on the last day at the last hour. And we didn't have a snowball's chance to get in the race, truly. But he told Johnny, he said, you know, it's now or never. You're just going to have to get in there and put it down and don't think about it. And he did. And so, you know, the other was riding around a double twin-seater at the Indianapolis 500.
I'm going to ask you about that.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I'd say that was probably the other big highlight. Was there was no way, and we made it in the race. We made it in the race 5 years in a row. And if you look at the history, there aren't a lot of teams that make it 5 years in a row. Now, obviously, the Penske's and the Ganassis and stuff, but if you look at the history, not a lot. And we did it 5 full years in a row, underfunded every year.
Yeah. And Johnny Unser's positions in the race weren't necessarily sterling finishes, but to give you an idea how talented he is, what does he do? What does he do? What's his day job? What does he do when he's not at 500? He was teaching stunt drivers how to drive, was he not? He was teaching professional drivers how to do this guy, he was talk a little bit about his background.
Yeah, well, he actually was a part owner also in a performance company that went around and took car dealership owners in rides and new cars and stuff that were coming on the market. He also, maybe you probably know this, he's actually the director of the Cooper Series, which is a racing series that just finished up down in Indy last week. It's a feeder series. But yeah, he taught a lot of driving. He's one of the smartest. He's like an Al Unser Sr. Al Unser Sr. was a driver that wouldn't tear up a car. Not like Andretti would go out, put it to the floor, didn't care if it tore it up, didn't care if it blew it up, didn't care. Al Unser Sr. would not tear up a car. If he had a chance to win, he'd take the risks. Same with Johnny, and same with Al Jr. But Johnny was a superb driver. He just didn't take stupid chances, you know. He didn't back into the wall like Sam Schmidt did and be paralyzed for the rest of his life because he was trying to push that edge too far. But he was a phenomenal driver. We just never had the top name equipment, you know.
What did he, and
he did commercials too. I forgot to tell you about that.
What?
Johnny did a lot of commercials. Yeah, he did a lot of commercials.
Driving cars and driving TV commercials.
Yeah, driving cars in really crazy situations. He drove one Cadillac in the early years into the ocean, and they never did find it. But they told him to, so he did it.
Yeah. Had to pay him enough money.
Yeah,
drive into the ocean. Yeah. Now, I'm sure you and Pam have talked about this. What was maybe one thing about the people, the other people in racing? The racing, what you'd call the auto racing community. The families, the businessmen, the sponsors, the crews. What was it? Was it a family? Did it have that feel to it while you were?
It very much did. It's a small community if you think about it. Even with 33 cars, it's a pretty small group of people, and so it's a pretty nice, tight-knit community. And for the most part, everybody helps everybody out. I mean, there's a few team owners that don't, and there's a few drivers that I won't mention, but their last name wouldn't be Andretti. But I'd say they help each other out. You don't always hear about it because they don't want their sponsors to know that they help somebody else out. Interesting point about AJ, if anybody follows auto racing, IndyCar racing, AJ Floyd has been a real, crazy guy at times, You put a TV camera in front of AJ Foyt, and he goes wild. But I had several occasions, to meet and talk to AJ, and the nicest guy you'd ever want to meet. Just a regular, down-home guy. And frankly, most of the drivers, now the younger, the real young drivers, they get kind of ego-ish, but most of the drivers and most of the team owners, just like us here, they can come in here and sit down and just talk to all of us. They don't have big egos. It's a little bit of a crooked business for sometimes, because some of these team owners will say things that they can't really do. Not the ones you know about, but some of the lesser ones. Dale Coyne used to be that way, but he straightened up. But it's a really close-knit, really great group of people.
I guess, racing fans like we are, our impressions of drivers particularly are shaped by maybe the media and their public relations teams that are there with them during the month. You talk about AJ having a personality behind closed doors that's different from his public persona.
Yeah.
Anybody else like that, and anybody who you thought, wow, I didn't expect to hear that coming from this person?
Buddy Lazier is a nut. Now, when he's on TV, he's not racing anymore, but when he was on TV, he did a pretty good job. Actually, all these drivers, if they want to stay in racing at a high level, they go through training as to how to talk on TV. And they have to be very good at it. But some of them are a little bit nutty, like Buddy Lazier. I mean, he was just nutty. Famous downhill skier, by the way. And a lot of these drivers, they started out doing other things before they became drivers. But I'm trying to think of, actually Mario, as he got older, was pretty nice. I got along with Mario pretty good. Roger Penske, really nice guy, just a super nice guy. You wouldn't want to meet a better guy. Just very, I don't know, probably, family, but Rick, she would say Rick Mears because that was her favorite. Rick's a really nice guy too. He drank too much beer after he got hurt, but he's a really nice guy. They're all really nice people. They really are. They sometimes show their, you see the egos because that's how they want to present them, yeah.
Well, let's kind of shift a little bit to the answers. Now, I know you have a lot of racing memorabilia, and on the table up here, I don't know if you got a chance to check it out. The trophy there, let's explain the trophy first and then talk about the helmet, Chuck.
Well, this trophy, this is not an IndyCar trophy. I've got a bunch of IndyCar trophies out there, but I brought this one because it's significant to tell the story really about IndyCar racing in the early days. This is a 1962 trophy that AJ Foyt won out at the Ascot Speedway, and this was his first major stock car win in the United States. It was on a dirt track, and at that time, these drivers had to travel wherever they could to make enough money to pay the bills, because they didn't make a lot of money back then. Bobby would sleep in the car, Al would sleep in his car. They would travel all over, and so this was his first major stock car win trophy, and I'm not supposed to have it. It got sold by accident at one of Foyt's sales. I also have and the other one is Al Unser's, one of Al Unser's helmets, signed by Al, and then he wore the race. And then I have here on my finger just an example. I think this was a year junior one, I'm not sure. But every year, the winner of the race and the team gets a ring. And it's been sponsored by different people, Brooke Jones, and I don't know who sponsors it now, but they give each one of those a ring. And we were lucky enough to be able to get one of those, or a couple of those, I guess. But yeah, so
it's, you talk about the answers, and it was kind of interesting. Between them, 3 of the racing answers have won 8 Indianapolis 500s. Is it 8 or 9?
No, it's 9. 9. That's 9.
4-time winner Al Unser Sr., 3-time winner Bobby Unser, 2-time winner Al Unser Jr. That's 8% or almost 9% of all of the 500s that have ever been run have been won by somebody with a last name of Unser. And you've got that great family legacy that can also be a burden, I would think. Does Johnny or any of them, even Al Sr., ever talk to you about just the family name?
Yeah, of course, Johnny grew up on the West Coast after his dad got killed out at Indy. His mom moved out to the West Coast to remarry. The one that I've talked the most about the problem with being an Unser is Al Jr. You know, Al Jr. had a big shoes to fill, and in high school he was picked on all the time because his famous family got into a lot of fights. He didn't start them, but he said I had to finish it, or my dad wouldn't have liked that. But so he had a difficult time growing up because he was always compared to his dad, even when he was racing in the sprint cars. I mean, he was a phenomenal driver, but still, you know, his dad was like the superhero, you know, around there. And so it was very difficult for him. Matter of fact, I think a lot of Al Jr.'s problems that he's had as an adult have come from those experiences trying to live up to that Unser legacy. And unfortunately, Al Jr. probably would have won 5 Indy 500s because that's when the IRL split was going on, when Al Jr. was at his peak. He was with Penske and had the best cars, but unfortunately, there for about 5 years, he wasn't able to race at the Indy 500.
You have become, and a lot of people don't really understand the attachment now that you have with the Unser family. You have become kind of, every family has the next ring of close friends, and you have really become part of that ring with Al Unser Sr. and Jr. and Al Sr.'s wife,
Yep.
and Johnny,
Yep.
and that then led you to become part of the original board of directors of the Unser Racing Museum, I believe.
Yep.
You have a Shura.
Yep.
Tell us a little bit about that and where it is and how that got going and what your role is.
Well, we were sitting down, actually it started, I'll try to make this short,
Okay.
I promise you. It started down in Orlando, Florida at the Race Rock. We were having dinner one night, and Al and Johnny and I think Dave Sweich was there. And Al said, you know, I think I might want to start a museum out in Albuquerque. I got a lot of stuff laying around, sitting around, and I'd like to get the Unser family tradition started. And so he talked about it, didn't hear much more about it. And then he met up with Susan Unser, which became his wife. And next thing you know, I'm sitting down in his motorhome in Indy, and he says, hey, would you like to be on the board of directors? We're going to start a museum. What? And so they started talking about it, and they bought a property in Albuquerque, actually just right outside of Albuquerque, but in Albuquerque, redid it, spent several $1 million getting it put together. And we've ran that museum now. It's 2003 is when it started, and this is what, 2023, right? Yeah, 20 years. And Bobby said it won't last more than a year, and by God, we made it last. Bobby Unser. By the way, Bobby Unser, how you see him on TV is just the way he is. He doesn't change much. But anyway, so that was I was honored to be able to get to know all of the Unsers. Even Bobby, I could get along with Bobby, not real well, but I could get along with Bobby if I had to. And Robbie, and I mean, sometimes I became like the commentator for the Unsers, because they never get, it's an old Unser tradition that goes back 4 generations. They just don't get along very well, you know. If there was a fight right here, they help the other one out till the death, but they just don't get along always very well independently. Now the younger ones do. But anyway, that museum's been going on 20 years, and we're actually in the process of moving that museum up to Lincoln without its passing, because we want to make sure that the world can see it. In Albuquerque, it's kind of limited because not a lot of people go to Albuquerque to see a museum of racing. So it's going to the #1 racing type museum, auto museum in the United States. We're in the process of doing that. Should have that all completed by November, open next year. But actually, I was on the board, and so I would help Al and Susan with any issues they had. I was kind of like the behind-the-scenes guy that kind of they consulted with for ideas and what to do and stuff. And then when Al passed, I was concerned about Susan, and so I got a hold of her and asked her if I could be of any help. And so I was the one in charge of going out and finding a place to move this museum to. And there were a whole bunch of calls and a lot of conversations and a lot of travel and trips and phones and everything. We got something worked out. And matter of fact, is this the 17th? Tomorrow we've got a board meeting, and I think we're going to probably approve the move of that museum tomorrow. I hope, anyway. You know.
So that would be from Albuquerque, New Mexico, which has always been the home base and hometown of the Unser family, to Lincoln, Nebraska.
Lincoln, Nebraska, yep. Yep.
Move it more toward the center of the country.
Yeah, and that's where racing is really, in Albuquerque they do have a track there, but the center, the Midwest is like open wheel, that's where open wheel happens, And this family, very dedicated to it, they got plenty of money to keep it going. It'll be around when everybody in this room is dead and gone. And we just couldn't be assured of that in Albuquerque because it's not a big attraction there. Because, even though the Unsers are, my argument from the very beginning was the Unser name is a worldwide name, not just Albuquerque, and we need to make sure that the Unser legacy lives on because it's an important legacy for all kinds of auto racing, most importantly today, IndyCar, but all racing. And so we're real hopeful Lonnie's going to do well, and that was part of the whole thing I put together was so that we can promote her and get her to a high level of racing.
Is this museum all racing or just?
No, it's everything. It's actually it's got we were out there and it has lunch boxes. It's got a collection of lunch boxes and records and Model T Fords and show cars of all different types. It's got a big IndyCar area. It's got a Pikes Peak hill climb area that they just added 90,000 square feet on the museum for that and the Unser exhibit. So it's got a little bit of everything. As a matter of fact, if you can ever get out there, I'm telling you, you will not be disappointed. To tell you the quick story, my wife, Pam, went out with me. We drove out, and she was going to go to the mall shopping because she said, I'm not going to be interested in all this crap. And she spent the whole day there and said, man, this was a lot of fun. Is that fair? I mean, she had a great time.
Yeah. You go online and you go online and take a look at the Unser Racing Museum and the reviews online, and it gets uniformly terrific reviews. It's not a very well-known museum, but perhaps will be much better than this.
It will be, and it's a top-notch museum. We spent the top-notch. It's one of the nicest museums. Well, a little biased, but I would say it's the nicest museum I've ever been to as far as the way they've laid, we've laid it out. It's not just, a car set here, it's not like if you go to the Indianapolis 500, if you go to the museum down there, it's just like a bunch of cars set side to side cordwood. We really make it more animated.
I'm going to have one more question, then I'm going to open it to the audience for some questions. I'm sure there may be some things you'd like to ask Chuck. I've had his attention the whole time here. But you mentioned a little while back that you had taken a lap in the two-seater. This is a two-seat, a double-seat Indy car. I'm sure if you follow racing, you know what I'm talking about. Race drivers are the driver, and the passenger is just there hanging on for dear life. You had that experience not long ago.
Yeah.
Can you tell us what it's like to take a lap of Indianapolis at, 180 mile an hour average or something along those lines?
Yeah, well, very fortunate. I happen to know that people that owned that, they were former car owners, Jeff Sinden, and Pam and myself and our daughter Brittany, all three were able to do it. And we were able to have Al Unser Sr. take us around, which he didn't do that normally, but I conned him into it. And so you're supposed to go, the top speed for the insurance for Jeff Sinden that he's got insured at is 160 miles per hour. That's supposed to go faster than that. And so he goes and tells Al, he says, no, 160 miles an hour, and do this, okay. So you're sitting right behind the driver, you know, and so to make a long story short, I'll tell you the backup in a second, but to make a long story short, we did not abide by the speed limit. We were going in excess of 180 miles per hour. Of course, Jeff knew that because they got all the timing stored there. And when you get up to speed, it takes about a lap and a half to get up to speed. When you go into turn one is like, it's like you're going to hit the wall because you're going 180 mile an hour, they're going faster than that now, but 180 mile an hour into turn one, and it's kind of shadowy, you know, there's kind of a shadow there, and so it looks like you're going to hit that frickin' wall, okay? It really does, but the ground effects allow you to make the turn. And so after you get through that, and you don't wet yourself too bad, turn two wasn't too bad, it's pretty open. And going into turn three, my experience was I thought my butt was going to go through the floorboard. It pulls you, there's so many G's, for some reason 3 is the one. Going into turn 3, that your rear end just feels like it's going to go right through the floor of the car. And then as you get out of turn 3, you go into turn 4, and that wall over there gets really short really fast. There's a short chute, and then you go into turn 4, and you get about this close, well, we got about this close to the wall. So I'd say turn 2 is about the only area that it typically don't, I guess you have seen a lot of wrecks recently, but typically it's turn 1 and 3. Matter of fact, Johnny had his worst crash in practice in turn 3, and Dagan near caused me to get out of racing, you know, because I didn't want my friend to get hurt. So, and I have a couple things I want to mention. Is one, and you probably don't know this, but there's a historian out of the Indianapolis 500, Donald Davidson, who's now retired, but he was supposed to be the guy that knew more about racing than anybody else in racing. I'm here to tell you that the gentleman sitting next to me knows more about racing than Donald Davidson. This guy knows more about IndyCar racing than anybody I know, including Donald Davidson. Matter of fact, you guys were talking one time down in Wabash at a meeting, and they could talk for about 2 days about it, you know. And he would say something to Donald Davidson, the story would go, I didn't know that, you know.
I don't remember that.
Yeah. So this is the guy that knows all about it. He's the expert.
Good. Well, now, when everybody sees the race this year and they see him coming into turn 3 off the backstretch, you tell whoever you're watching with, I know how he feels. Yeah. I know exactly, I've been told exactly how that feels going into turn 3.
And Johnny Unser, I just learned this yesterday, Johnny Unser is going to be driving Johnny Rutherford's car in a parade lap, one of Johnny Rutherford's old cars. So that'll be a neat thing.
Okay, super. Well,
and also, Al Jr. owes me, right, man? Al Jr. is going to owe me big time. And so I'm going to get Al Jr. up here certainly for like a Rotary Kiwanis thing, but we probably ought to just invite everybody to it because he'll tell some stories that'll make your head go swirly. But yeah, so Al Jr. will be coming up, pretty sure of it.
Good enough.
I'll let you know Friday.
Okay. All right. I'm going to open the floor. Questions for Chuck?
Chuck, do these car owners make money doing this, or is this just an expensive hobby?
There's not a car owner that would tell you they make money. Some car owners do make money, but not very many of them. Penske would tell you he makes money at it because he wants you to think he does, but I don't see how on earth he ever would. He uses it to promote the Penske name. I know Ron Himmelgarn, who we were with, always said he made money. He never made money. Tom Kelly said he made money. His dad Jim said, no, we lose money. So it's not really. Chip Ganassi, Target, used to have the Target deal. He made money, but not many of them make money at it. It's a passion. They just love it.
You know how you make a small fortune in auto racing, right? You're starting out with a larger.
Yeah, that's exactly true.
Sir?
Chuck, how much, if any, involvement did you have with the Hallman family who previously owned the track?
Bingo.
Well, I got to meet Mary Holman at several victory banquets. Not sweet lady, she's passed away now. Sweet lady, very nice lady. Actually, was over in Mid-Ohio with a race with Al one time and got to talking to her quite a little bit. She was up on a pit stand with me, and just a sweet lady. Tony George, who's actually the owner of Ed Carpenter Racing, just didn't call it that. Nice enough guy. He screwed up the IRL though. He's not much of a businessman, I'll just say that. I'm not talking bad about him, he knows this, I told him face to face. I gave him so many marketing recommendations that I believe would have caused the IRL to move forward, and he didn't listen to a damn one of them. I said, if you're gonna have a race, I don't care where it's at, those grandstands need to be filled. If you have to pay people or give a free ticket, I don't care what you have to do, but when that's on ABC or one of the other networks, you better have full stands, because people want to hang around with people that are successful, and if those stands are empty, ain't nobody going to want to come to a race. And he didn't listen to it. But he said they're all really nice people, and they didn't sell the track until Mary passed away, because that was really her passion. And about a year and a half after she passed is when they sold it to Roger Penske. And I don't think, we were just talking about this, I don't think they got as much as they could have out of it, but they sold it to Penske because, I mean, that guy loves Indy too, and he will make sure that the Indy 500 doesn't get disturbed for decades.
I read somewhere just recently where he put another $50 million into that track this year, or since, from last May to
Yeah.
this May.
I believe that.
So it's things are getting, they're getting spiffed up out there. I think they've done a lot with the video boards in the infield and that type thing.
They need to make it a little bit more of a carnival atmosphere. They've done good things with they moved the snake pit down to turn 3, and they've got stuff going on during the race, which is great. I think they need to, across the way, they need to have more of a carnival atmosphere or something like that. They need to draw everybody in. They do it at Long Beach, California. They bring they have a carnival going on, they have all kinds of events, they have a pro-am race, they do all this stuff, and it's the second most popular race after Indy. Well, why is it? It's because they got a really good promoter out there. And I think you'll see that with Penske over time. It's already started.
Jim, did you have a question?
I was going to say, when you say T-bone specialists, are those guys that overdrive and cause wrecks?
Some drivers don't understand that it's a 500-mile race. And some of them ready want to go as fast as they can go until the car breaks. And they're not the only ones, there's a lot of them. But Bobby was another one that just drove his car into the ground. But yeah, they would just drive like there's no tomorrow, Al always told me that the last 50 laps of the race, if you're on the lead lap, you better get your butt in gear. And on the last 20 is when you take all the risks. Because he said, the other laps don't really matter. You're just trying to be there at the end of the race on the lead lap. And you got to have a little luck in you too. I mean, luck's part of it.
Steve?
In 1960, I think it was Jim Hurtubise went 150 miles an hour in time trials. I was fortunate enough to be there. But in the last, let's say 15 to 20 years, we haven't seen the speeds increase that much. And we reached a technological level where you got to become airborne to go much faster.
No, they can go faster. They just intentionally slowed them down. And when you have, it used to be at Indy, race what you brung, and they had pretty liberal rules. Well, they've changed that over the years, and so there's a spec car. Everybody has to race the same car. There's 2 engines. There's 1 type of tire. And so the engine companies don't want their engines to blow because that makes them look bad. And so they tune the engines down so that they won't blow. You don't hardly ever see an engine blow anymore. And they've controlled the aerodynamics on the car so that it can't go any faster in the corner, because that's what's slow. If you can get around the corner faster, they can go faster. And they're getting real close again. But Al Senior always told me, no matter what they do to slow down cars, somebody's going to find a way to either, he would say cheat and make them go faster, because that's, there's a lot of that goes on in all kinds of racing. A.J. Floyd's comments were, it ain't cheap unless you get caught, A.J. used to have I can't tell you when it was that somebody had killed me, but they used to have nitro bottles that they put with the driver, they put it under their suits. And if you look when some of the cars would get on the front row, but then they wouldn't do very good during the race, they had a nitro bottle they'd hook up on the qualifications. Well, nitro is going to make you go a lot faster, but it won't go long because it'll blow the engine. But they only had to go 4 laps. And AJ was pretty popular for that. They kind of let him get by with it a little bit, the George family did, because, AJ. But they, I bought a car one time. I was sitting at home in the hot tub. You remember this man? I was at home in the hot tub, and Ron Himmelgarn calls me. We're doing a sponsorship deal, and I was trying to decide if I wanted to buy the car or pay the money to sponsor. I ran the numbers. It was actually cheaper to buy a car and then resell it later on than it was to do the sponsorship. So I called him, I want to buy your second car. And so we talked and talked and talked. We cut a deal. I bought a car for, I think it was around $250,000 or $300,000 over the phone. And I said, okay, let's do it. Tomorrow I'll wire the money to you. And he calls me up the next morning at about 8 o'clock and said, well, I can't sell you that car because my crew chief, I can't think of his name, but my crew chief at the time for Ron Himmelgarn said, that's got all of our trick stuff on it, and if you sell it to Chuck, I quit. Because it had all the cheat on it, and he didn't want anybody else knowing what the cheat was. So I ended up just sponsoring the car. But I got a better deal.
Anyone else have a question for Jesse?
How would you compare IndyCar versus NASCAR?
Well, I'm going to be nice.
Please do.
I got friends in NASCAR, so I'm not talking bad about them. I think NASCAR is just a bunch of follow leaders. They've got to spec so close. It used to be years ago, bring race what you bring. I think, and I don't even, from a marketing standpoint, they're the best marketers. They market very well. And so sometimes they make races very marketable and not very competitive, if you kind of understand. And so I'm not a big fan of NASCAR because I know some of the stuff that they do, and there's a lot of politics in it. But again, the France family made billions of dollars, so how do you find fault in them? But it's more of a show many times. At least when I was more involved, it was more of a show than it was a race. They didn't pick the winner, but they didn't always check for everything on the car. How do you say that nicely? But it's a good race. They've got a huge following, been very successful. It's just a little more contrived than what I like. Although IndyCar, a little bit, but not as much. Although I did learn something the other day. I was telling you when we were talking. If you look, a lot of times. What they call the home track for a particular driver, they tend to win a few races at those tracks. I'm not going to say
It's got a little extra pump.
yeah,
Right. Yeah.
they're just a little excited, but they're all pretty legit now because I think they've been ferreted out over the years. But back in the old days, they could get by with a lot more than they can today. I think NASCAR is pretty legit now. IndyCar, I know, is legit now. But that's the old days.
Any other questions?
Baseball, we call that, the umpires are homers.
What's that?
The umpires are homers.
Yeah, I'd say that's fair.
Okay.
Did you meet Jim Neighbors?
Actually, I did. Story about that. Pam and I went down to a victory banquet downtown that they have after the race, the Monday after the race. And Jim Neighbors got an award. He was there to get an award for, I don't know, citizenship, I don't know what it was. And so I'm coming out of the restroom before we leave, and Jim's standing there. Jim Neighbors is standing there. He said, hey, he was holding his award. He said, hey, would you hold my award while I go to the restroom? Is that true? Yeah, true story. I said, sure. So Jim gives me his award. I'm standing there holding his award while he goes to the restroom and comes back. Nice guy. Super nice guy. Super nice guy.
Is there only one manufacturer of the frames?
Yes. Yeah, just one. I believe it's DeLar. those same chassis around for a number of years. Now, they'll tweak some of the parts on them, like the front end and the wings and stuff a little bit, but they try to keep them for as many years as they can, just because of the cost. Because, some of these teams will have 6, 8 cars, I mean, if they have a car on the track, they'll have 1 or 2, depending on the team, they'll have 1 or 2 other cars behind it. And so when they change cars, basically, the car is a show car now, it's not worth anything. And, NASCAR's done the same thing to keep their costs down. Whatever car you see today every car out there is the same car, just badged differently, If you're a NASCAR fan, I hope I didn't offend you, I don't mean that,
Well, Chuck, thank you, sir.
It was my honor, it was my honor.
I think we've appreciated a peek behind the curtain of the greatest spectacle in racing, and appreciate your involvement in the investment you and your family and your businesses put into it. Thank
It's
you.
my honor, my honor.
Chuck will be here for a few minutes if you have any other particular questions. We have to have the place cleared out by midnight, so but thank you all for coming. I hope you appreciate the program, and on behalf of the Historical Society, good evening and thanks. And drive safely, all right?